Sometimes, the biggest threats to our sexual health aren't the dramatic moments we expect, but the quiet patterns we slowly normalize, the hesitation we ignore, the intimacy that doesn't feel like connection anymore, the discomfort we tell ourselves is no big deal, and the red flags, for both men and women, that whisper long before they ever shout. These sexual health red flags can quietly shape our emotional connection, our trust, our communication, our mental clarity, and even our long-term relationship satisfaction. And if you've ever wondered whether something you felt in your intimate life was just a phase or actually a sign of something deeper, you're not alone. Sexual health is deeply connected to emotional health, attachment, self-awareness, and the psychology of relationships. And ignoring certain signs can slowly shift the entire foundation of your connection. What do you think about this? Have you ever felt something was off but didn't know how to name it? I'm the intimacy doctor, real talk, real science, real intimacy. And today, I want to take you into a slow, grounded, deeply honest conversation about the sexual health red flags that men and women should never ignore. Not because we're hunting for problems, but because awakening to them helps us build healthier relationships, healthier emotional patterns, and healthier versions of ourselves. This isn't about blame. It's not about judging your partner or yourself. It's about understanding how emotional connection, trust, communication, desire, and psychological safety shape intimacy more than anything else. Let's start with one of the biggest red flags that often hides in silence, when intimacy begins to feel more like pressure than connection. For women, this can show up as feeling obligated to say yes, even when the body says no. For men, it often shows up as anxiety about performance or fear of disappointing their partner, which turns intimacy into something tense instead of something shared. When sex becomes a task instead of a temperature check of the relationship, something is out of balance. The research on emotional intimacy shows that when desire feels forced, the nervous system activates stress instead of connection. And stress shuts down desire in both men and women. So if intimacy is starting to feel like something you're supposed to do rather than something you want to do, that's not a small issue. It's a clue, a signal that communication has weakened, that emotional connection needs attention, and that something deeper may need to be talked about openly, gently, honestly. Have you ever felt this? Share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who might need to hear your perspective. Another powerful red flag appears when desire drops suddenly, dramatically, or consistently, and not because of a temporary life change, but because emotional connection has shifted. For men, a sudden drop in desire can be connected to stress, emotional disconnection, or unresolved conflict. It's rarely just physical. For women, desire is heavily influenced by emotional safety, communication, and the feeling of being understood. When a woman feels emotionally distant or misunderstood, her body often mirrors that through decreased desire. Relationship science shows that for women, emotional intimacy is often the doorway to physical intimacy. For men, physical intimacy is often the doorway to emotional intimacy. When these doorways stop aligning, partners feel like they are reaching for each other but missing. And if couples ignore that misalignment, resentment grows quietly. So if you or your partner are losing desire and nobody is talking about why, that's a flag asking for attention. Not criticism, attention. If this resonates, tap the like button so more people can find videos like this. There's another red flag that both men and women overlook: when intimacy becomes disconnected from emotion. For men, this may show up as using physical closeness to avoid difficult conversations. For women, it might look like going through the motions because emotionally they feel unseen or unheard. When emotional health declines, when communication weakens, when trust feels shaky, when conflict isn't resolved but simply buried, the body often carries the consequences. And although sex can sometimes bring short-term closeness, it doesn't replace emotional repair. If intimacy is being used to smooth over conflict instead of talk through conflict, the dynamic slowly becomes unstable. Real intimacy isn't a shortcut, it's a reflection of emotional safety. And when that reflection starts to look unfamiliar, It's a sign to slow down and ask, what's really happening underneath? Another subtle but powerful red flag, when one partner starts feeling consistently insecure, not because of jealousy, but because of unpredictability. When you never know how your partner will respond, when affection feels inconsistent, when the emotional tone of the relationship swings between warm and cold. These patterns affect sexual health in both men and women more than most people realize. Men who feel emotionally rejected often internalize it as inadequacy. Women who feel emotionally unsafe often internalize it as self-doubt. Attachment research shows that unpredictability in affection activates the brain's threat system, making desire harder, emotional connection weaker, and communication more reactive. If you're constantly walking on eggshells, your body remembers that stress, and it shows up in your intimate life. Emotional inconsistency is not just a personality thing. It's a red flag that the relationship needs deeper emotional repair. Let's talk about another sign people rarely identify as a sexual health red flag: when intimacy feels transactional. When one person gives affection to get something, attention, forgiveness, reassurance, validation, or when a partner withholds intimacy to punish, control, or manipulate. These patterns harm both men and women because they confuse intimacy with power instead of connection. They create fear around expressing needs, they create silence around desires, and they create emotional distance where there should be trust. If affection ever feels like a currency instead of a connection point, something in the dynamic needs to be rebuilt from a place of honesty and emotional health. If you've experienced anything like this, what did it teach you? Share your thoughts. Someone else might find clarity in your story. There's another red flag that hides beneath humor or distraction. When a partner avoids any conversation about intimacy, avoiding the topic altogether, making jokes to dodge discomfort, changing the subject every time you express a need. When communication about intimacy shuts down, emotional closeness shuts down with it. Men often avoid these conversations because they fear shame, criticism, or the pressure to perform emotionally. Women often avoid them because they fear rejection, invalidation, or the fear of being too much. But silence creates confusion. Confusion creates insecurity, and insecurity creates emotional distance. The couples who grow together are the ones who stay curious about each other, not the ones who avoid the hardest conversations. Communication is not optional for intimacy, it's the foundation. A powerful red flag that many people overlook is when physical intimacy feels one-sided, not in frequency, but in attention. When one partner's pleasure is consistently prioritized while the other's needs are ignored or dismissed. When curiosity about each other fades, when listening disappears, when presence is missing. Sexual health relies on mutuality, not perfection, but awareness. If one partner is always initiator or always caretaker, something becomes imbalanced emotionally. Over time, imbalance turns into emotional exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion turns into resentment, and resentment slowly erodes desire. If you've ever felt unseen in your intimate life, remember this: needing emotional presence is not being needy. It's human. Healthy intimacy requires both people to show up. There's also the red flag of secrecy, but not the obvious kind. Not cheating, not flirting, not betrayal. I'm talking about emotional secrecy. When a partner hides their stress, retreats emotionally, withdraws from connection, or becomes distant without explanation. Men often retreat when they feel overwhelmed. Women often retreat when they feel hurt. But secrecy, even the soft kind, creates emotional gaps that intimacy can't fill. Emotional connection is built through openness, and openness is built through trust. If trust weakens, sexual health weakens alongside it. Intimacy becomes fragile. Desire becomes fragile. Emotional safety becomes fragile. And when emotional safety disappears, intimacy becomes something the body resists instead of welcomes. Another red flag is comparing your current intimate life to an idealized version, either from past relationships, fantasy, or unrealistic expectations. Men may compare themselves to standards that create anxiety. Women may compare their experience to unrealistic narratives about pleasure or connection. Comparison is destructive because it removes presence, it removes acceptance, it removes curiosity, and intimacy cannot grow where comparison lives. If you or your partner are feeling pressure to meet an unrealistic standard, that's not a small issue. It's a disconnect between expectation and emotional reality. And closing that gap requires compassion, honesty, and patience. Let's talk about emotional red flags that impact physical intimacy. Resentment that's never resolved, arguments that stay open wounds, apologies that feel incomplete, needs that stay unspoken. These create emotional blockages that the body responds to. Men often experience this as sudden drops in desire or difficulty connecting. Women often experience it as discomfort, disinterest, or emotional shutdown. This isn't weakness, it's biology. The nervous system stores conflict, and if conflict is unresolved, intimacy doesn't feel safe. If your body feels distant even when you want to feel close, that's not failure. It's information, it's self-awareness, it's your emotional health speaking through sensation. If this resonates, tap the like button so more people can find this video. There's a deeper red flag when intimacy becomes the only form of affection. When a partner is physically close only during intimate moments, but emotionally distant the rest of the time. This pattern leaves both men and women confused. Do they want me? Or do they just want the moment? Emotional closeness must exist outside the bedroom, or physical closeness becomes confusing, lonely, or even painful. Affection must be a daily language, not a single event. Another red flag is when your intuition keeps nudging you, and you keep ignoring it. Maybe you feel disconnected but can't explain why. Maybe something feels off but you don't have evidence. Maybe your body isn't responding the way it used to. Maybe communication feels strange. Intuition is not drama. It's emotional data. Your emotional health speaks through subtle patterns, changes in mood, changes in desire, changes in comfort. When you ignore these signals, the relationship drifts quietly. But when you listen, you grow. And finally, one of the most important red flags, when you or your partner stop being emotionally curious about each other. Curiosity is the heart of intimacy. When partners stop asking, "How are you feeling?" or "What do you need?" or "What's happening inside you lately?" intimacy begins to fade. But when curiosity stays alive, emotional connection stays alive. And when emotional connection stays alive, intimacy becomes a reflection of trust, not stress. As you reflect on these red flags, remember this: none of this is about blame. Sexual health is relationship health, emotional health, communication health, attachment health. It's a mirror of how two people care, listen, repair, and grow together. And if one of these red flags appeared in your life, it doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It means the relationship is asking for care. What do you think about all this? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel understood. If this conversation resonated with you, tap the like button so more people can find videos about emotional intelligence, intimacy, communication, and relationship science. And if you want more real talk, real science, and real intimacy, subscribe to the Intimacy Doctor and turn on notifications so you never miss videos on emotional connection, trust, conflict resolution, and building healthy love. And if you're ready to go deeper into relationship psychology, watch the next video I've linked. It explores the emotional patterns that quietly shape desire and connection, and it might give you exactly the clarity you've been searching for.